to the InnerVerse. Fear is an illusion.
Welcome to the One Within All to the InnerVerse podcast. I'm your host, Chance, coming to you from another beautiful moment to take hold of your health and wholeness. And as the summer solstice of 2024 draws near, the height of the sun and of consciousness in our realm, it is a perfect time to make some of the wild events in our rearview mirror a little bit more clear. With cowpokes and cooties world order lockdowns seemingly a thing of the past, the trauma of our generation's 9/11 2.0 is still going strong in the biofield with many of my tuning clients. And before the fervor of lockdown-induced awakenings cools any further, it behooves those of us who've been paying attention since before the big shutdown production took effect to level up our rhetoric around the difference between the science, trademark, versus the truth about how illness works, so that those we love who are still opened up to questioning the many beliefs they used to take for granted can benefit from our concise and logical insight to once and for all lay to rest the unproven theories and pseudosciences that the medical establishment has long used to bully the gullible into guzzling bogus petrochemical pills based on their fear of the invisible boogeyman known as germs and viruses. Most importantly, dropping the common misconceptions around sickness opens up new worldview vistas that empower and potentiate our effectiveness to break out of rat races and 9-to-5 hamster wheels through the recognition that not only are our thoughts and emotions guiding our biological expression, our mental framework either facilitates or frustrates the manifestation of our deepest soul-level purpose in life. The good news, my friends, is that our guest today ain't just some bandwagon big pharma basher, as we're blessed with the presence of the one and only Don Lester, who co-authored one of the foundational texts of the terrain theory trend, blowing the whistle on the wishy-washy biomedical business model way back in December of 2019, telling the truth when it mattered the most, before the lockstep house arrest hysteria was even a thing. In What Really Makes You Ill, Why Everything You Thought You Knew About Disease Is Wrong, Dawn Lester, alongside her partner David Parker, reframes the dominant ideas about disease as the mythos that these theories really are, illuminating readers about all aspects of medical misconceptions and sounding the alarm about the covert agenda for control that are at their core. I admit that when I first heard Dawn and David on the podcast circuit way back when, with their book those 5 long years ago, that despite being well aware of the nature of, well, nature being mental, even I thought their conclusions were a bridge too far. But thanks to the big show-stealing reveal of 2020 through 2022, I can see clearly now just how right Dawn and David were. We've come a long way, my friends, and although the crisis is past, there's never been a more crucial time to educate ourselves about natural health and fraudulent scientism, and so we'd better get cracking. Don't forget to check the show notes for all the ways you can support InnerVerse, and while you're there, make sure to add What Really Makes You Ill to your most prominent bookshelf. And with that, let's do it. Welcome to InnerVerse, Dawn. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you for inviting me, Chance. It's great to be here and be speaking to you.
I know. I feel like it's long overdue. And honestly, I thought you were just a little above my range in terms of understanding for a while there. But I think this is, it's always the right moment. And this is the time. And really glad that we're getting to mix it up. Why don't you tell the listeners, what you'd like them to know about yourself as we're getting started here?
Oh, well, the journey to write the book started quite a long while ago. It started with a course that David and I were running at the time to do with the nature of reality. And then part of reality, obviously, is how the body works and how we get ill, if what illness is about, what health is about. So started to look into that and realised that there was quite a lot that was wrong that we were being told. Once you start actually looking at what we're told, the official version, once you start looking behind that and looking into the history, you start to find that there's a whole different story. So we thought we'd, put it together and put some information out. But the more we looked, the more we realised we had to just keep diving deeper to really support everything we were saying. And at the same time, to look at the bigger picture and to see how the health model fits into everything else that we're told. And and we found that it's not just a health thing on its own. It is certainly part of a bigger agenda that covers just about every aspect of life to not let us know who we are and what we can do. So it's really to try and keep us under control. And so the research just carried on until we thought we'd probably got to enough so that sorry behind. So it ended up a almost 800-page tome, which covers quite a lot of, as I say, the background and some history to put the picture together so that people can see it's not just a few theories, and it's not just our ideas and opinions. We got as much supported material as we could get into there, and there's pages of references and people can go and have a look at and just have a look for themselves just what we've been told is just not supported by real evidence. I mean, it's ridiculous to say real science. You shouldn't have to put the word real in front of science, but I think more and more of us are realizing that it's become scientism, and real science, which is actually just a process of discovering. It's the word of just, it's the way of learning. It's to learn about the world. So it's not a thing, it's a process. And yet it's been turned into something that it's not. So it's really to show that up and to show what we're told about our health is through the medical establishment system just isn't the way the body works. So and it was definitely what you might call divine timing for it to come out at December 2019, just before 2020 and those wonderful events. So something somewhere, there's divine guidance, if you like, we know. And it's really interesting because during 2019, as we were putting it together and trying to, organise how to publish it, there were some lumpy, bumpy parts, and it was certain things were being difficult. And then towards the latter half of 2019, there was just suddenly everything just seemed to flow really quickly. That just all got it together, so we could get it out at the end of 2019. So yeah. I mean, I'm aware of that there's more to us, and knowing what I'd learnt about the nature of reality led me to kind of realise that when that book came out and what happened just afterwards, it was just, it was the right thing at the right time and meant to be part of this, so that, that's why we made it so comprehensive, so that as many people as possible could get the bigger picture. I mean, we had at one point thought of putting it out in sort of 2 smaller volumes, but I wasn't sure. We were kind of not sure whether people would, buy the set, as it were. And it really does need people to look at the second part of what's behind it, who's behind it, the vested interest, and how it's not just about, the US and the UK kind of health systems, it does cover what's going on in the rest of the world and how that's controlled. So, it does cover quite a lot more than just the idea of what makes us ill, but that's the basis of it. So that's a bit of background. But neither of us have a background in, the medical system. So we've come as with open minds as researchers, which in some ways has worked to our benefit because we haven't got the biases to overcome. And at the same time, it's caused a little bit of, how comes these people can tell us, they don't know anything about health and medicine and all that stuff. So, but, research is research. You can find the information. It's probably harder now to find what we found. Because of censorship.
You guys are probably the poster children for why there were articles coming out during Cooties that said, like, why it's not safe to do your own research. Which, I don't know how people can see that and then ever take seriously wherever was saying that again. But that's the type of stuff that was just widely accepted. Like, you need the expert opinion. I'm curious about a little bit more about the path to getting to writing that book, because you mentioned a course about the nature of reality. How do a couple of fine folks like you and David find yourself even in that realm? What was the stuff that started to crack open the materialist paradigm, or were you always a little more spiritually minded in the way that you perceived reality?
Yeah. First of all, David and I just worked together. We're not a kind of couple or whatever some people think that, but that's fine. It's but David's looked into the philosophies and that sorts of that stuff all his life. He'd been reading up on it and been had quite a strong background in looking into all of that, and looked into various works by, sort of Theosophical Society and all those sorts of people, and those different traditions, the ancient traditions, wisdom traditions from the East, Buddhism, Hinduism. He's been researching that for a long time. I had what you might call just a general interest from just when I was young, I remember sitting in my bedroom kind of looking sort of out the window and thinking of, this huge universe that, like, there's an eternity before me, an eternity after me, and who am I? What am I? Well, what's life all about? How does it work? That kind of stuff. So I had these questions, but never found. The people around me weren't the sort of people to ask, shall we say? So I kind of kept those thoughts to myself, but definitely curious. So I had, keep it brief. I was married. I had a diagnosis of the C word, the crab word. Just being careful with, in the mid-90s. And at the time, I have no idea where it came from, but I knew it was something to do with my mindset, and I had to make changes in my life. It wasn't just something bad has happened and you go through whatever it is that I did have the treatment. At the same time, I didn't hang on to that kind of strong belief in the medical system. So I'm just choosing my words carefully. I wasn't committed to the system enough to believe in it and hang on their every word, as it were. I also created experiences where I was never given like dire prognoses or any nonsense like that. So that was okay, as I say. But I knew at the time it was something to do with my mindset. So I started to make some changes in my life, and one of them ended up coming out of the marriage I was in. And it was coming out of that, and then I discovered fairly locally there was a centre, and somebody recommended going to a Reiki class. And I'd never heard about that. And it was like, oh, this sounds interesting. And when I started actually kind of practicing Reiki, I was like, wow, I really like this. It was, there was something, I was drawn to it. So I thought I was going to, do something more with that. And at the same centre, that's where David was running the course. And so I thought, oh, this sounds interesting. Then took the course, and that just really resonated with. And there were some parts of it where I was just like, almost as if I knew it, even though I don't know how I knew it. So again, it was obviously connecting. I was connecting with it at a deeper level. So I was moving into a different way of living. So that eventually got to the interest in the health thing that then turned into the other book. So that's a convoluted sort of way to get there. But when you're supposed to be somewhere, you'll get there, no matter which way around you go. Even if it's the long way around, you'll still get there.
I didn't know this part of your story, that you had to grapple with the big C word. And that's, if there's anything that will give you an insider view of the medical establishment, it's going through that course of treatment. So really glad you made it out the other side. And I was wanting to ask you about like personal, potentially mystical experiences, even if they're subjective, but what I imagine, that type of fight for your life type of experience would have lots of mystical undertones in terms of seeing and transforming your worldview and your view of yourself.
No, I don't know that it's like mystical. I'm not sure if, but again, I suppose, it depends on how you define that. But I certainly was doing a lot of talking to myself and inner work and deciding what life was about, what I wanted to do. And I've been thinking about this lately, that I remembered, when I was young, I always loved reading. So, having loads of books around is fine for me. So it's just because I loved reading, I just thought, so I love reading. And then I've realized recently that it was sort of escapism. So I was finding ways to sort of put myself into these stories. And I just disappear into the story, obviously. So there was something going on that made me not particularly happy with the life I had, to be able to kind of want to escape into some other story, some other life, something somewhere else. And in many ways, that experience of the 90s was a wake-up call to say, you got to do something. There was also a thought before that happened, that, or was it after? Oh, I lose track sometimes. That there was something in me that I wanted to do something useful with my life. Now, that's not to say, the life I was leading wasn't useful in some ways. It was just so maybe that's the mystical part of being drawn to do something different. That there was a calling for me to do something, and it took that kind of wake up call for me to go, I need to think about this a bit differently, and it made me need to. I didn't know what the changes were, and I think that often happens to me. That I think most of us, we don't know, so we just go with our intuition and see what feels right, and then circumstances present themselves and opportunities present themselves that feel right, and then you move with that, and then you just find yourself sort of moving in what is obviously the right direction. So it's so I suppose that part of it is mystical, just opening myself up, because I had no idea what I was going to do. So I was just open to opportunities, and sometimes looking back and thinking that was a leap in the dark, and at the same time, obviously, somewhere I was trusting myself that it would lead to something that would take me to fulfilling what this inner desire was to do something useful, whatever that is. So it's been a journey, and I know now why a lot of the circumstances that I've been through. I say not so much why, but I can see how they're helpful for me with what I'm doing now to be able to look at that and to see, yes, the mindset, the way I thought, what I was doing, how I felt, that I didn't fall into the trap of just following the white coats and the system to the T. And because I saw people around me who were very sad. I suppose I must have a survival instinct or something else. I don't, maybe, again, survival, maybe not the best word either, because I'm doing more than surviving. I've got myself through that, and it's been an interesting journey.
We don't have the context for it in the West, culturally speaking, but your story sounds a lot like a shamanic healing crisis, where somebody in the tribe is seemingly just one of the regular folk, and then they go through some sort of near death, or maybe not in a traditional NDE full on, but like they have a close shave where everything gets turned upside down, and they go through this hard time, and it's usually some very acute health thing that leads to it. And then on the other side of it, they are able to begin transmitting information from, if you want to call it the other world or the spiritual realm, back to the people. And even though it may not look like that whenever you're doing research and writing a book, and the information that you're gathering is, all here in the physical realm, when you look at the timing of it all, it seems very evident to me that the spiritual realm and their guide system wanted the information that you and David brought forward to come in at the time that it came in. It was like, imagine how many terrain theory researchers and germ theory disputers were able to take your work as a scaffolding and build on it and share the message. And I mean, we're in a totally different climate in terms of where the needle is at on public perception and trust in all of that stuff. It's really like that. To me, it seems like a completely shamanic thing,
Yes, there's a kind of hero's journey type feel to it, I suppose. It's a similar kind of idea, isn't it, really? That journey of how you put yourself through various situations, how you come out of them, because then when you share information with other people, at least you've got a way of being able to empathize with the situations they're going through, or just be able to say, look, I know it works. I mean, there's a lot of people who have various ideas about, is another word I need to be careful about, things that will stop the C word, but nothing stops it as such, because it's a process, not a thing. And so that's why the subtitle is, what we think about disease is wrong, because we're just given such a wrong model. That's not how it works. And that's really one of the key factors, I think, of knowing how the body actually works, to be able to then take the control back. And to be able to take the control back is very empowering. It does require responsibility as well. So I suppose, having gone through that journey, I can say, look, without knowing what was in the book as such, I still have I still knew somehow that I had to make certain changes. Now I do something, well, I wouldn't have to grapple with that label in the first place. Let's put it that way.
This is a subject I've really inquired about a lot, but I imagine if you're doing all the research you've done and for the book and since then about subjects like virology, what about the big C word could we say in terms of why the body does it? Because one of the paradigm shifts that I think is really important is to understand that your body never does anything wrong per se, that everything your body does, every expression of a symptom or what seems like trouble is something that it must do to maintain homeostasis for as long as it can. So sometimes stuff that seems like critical and very negative is like your body actually saving your life in some way that you just can't perceive on your end because you might be pretty out of tune with your body and the conditions that you created in the first place that led you there. So from that perspective or something similar, like what's the function, what's the benefit or the purpose biologically for why people get the big C, or is it something that's more engineered and beyond the scope of what the body should naturally be doing? I'm just, I'm wondering what your thoughts are on that.
I've continued to learn since 2019. So I'm still in the process of adding to what I understood at the time. And certainly with the information that's come out over the last 4.5 years, there's a lot that we're learning how the body actually works. And I think that's one of the problems is having these labels in the first place, that people think it's a thing. Like I say, that there's a disease thing that we get, rather than, as you rightly saying, there's a process within the body, and it is the body doing its best to look after itself, because that's what the body does. It's not some mechanical thing of parts that they can fix, because it's an interconnected system, and what happens in one part is not isolated in that part. It's all interconnected. And just because there's a symptom in one part, it doesn't mean there's something wrong with that part either. And that's the other problem, of course, that, when people have symptoms, they think there's something wrong with them that needs to be fixed. And that, again, is the whole model. And as you say, it's the body working through its own natural processes. And I think the C word actually may represent a range. Well, even the medical system calls it a variety of different conditions. It's not a single condition. I think it's even more nuanced than that there are, because we're all unique, we will respond to whatever is the appropriate condition within the body that we, the message that we need to listen to. So in some cases, these tumours are recognised as being packages of toxins that the body puts aside until it can actually deal with it. And that's a valid interpretation of certain forms. And it certainly makes sense because, we're exposed to all sorts of toxins, and again depends on the rest of the person's environment and their inner terrain and the condition of the body and everything else that they're exposed to. So again, it's also connected to our thoughts and beliefs and emotions, and I think there's that element of it is missing in many cases. It is being recognised. I know it's mentioned in German New Medicine, GNM. I don't think it's the answer. The biological shock aspect is not the answer, not the total answer to everything. At the same time, I can recognise that the situation I was in, I wasn't happy. I was under a lot of stress, and there was an emotional component to it for me. And also, since I've learned about human design in the last couple of years, with the way I am, with my design, then when I'm not operating when I'm in the not self, then frustration is the main emotion. And at the time, because I wasn't happy, I was frustrated in what I was doing, the work, my life, whatever it was. So I can see now that, that's what I'm saying. The more I learn, the more I can kind of put the pieces together and think, oh, okay, so that was the representation of me operating from not self. So that's why whatever it was, I wanted to there was something else I wanted to do. So that was the frustration bubbling up and giving me the message. So it's because whenever people say, well, if it's not this one thing, what is it? And the answer is there's never a single something. And in terms of even causes, there's so many different factors that are involved. And it's not even that you're ill, it's just your body's out of homeostasis. And that can be corrected in a number of ways. And, with your biofield tuning practice, I'm sure you've seen all kinds of things where all certain symptoms of different things have resolved through tuning. So it's not and that's not in the body. So again, there's so much more to us, to all of this, and the energy aspect of it is definitely an important factor. The emotional, the energy factor is because we are not just, as I say, this, what the medical establishment think, this kind of machine of parts that can just be fixed. That bit's a problem. Oh, we'll just cut it out. You don't need it. The body is the way it is. It's divinely created. The body is the way it is because that's how it works and that's how it's supposed to work. So taking anything away, yes, the body can compensate to a certain extent. Obviously, there are certain things, that it can't compensate for, but it can, again, to a certain extent, which is why the whole it's only toxins is not the full answer. Although in some cases, I think there's mesothelioma that is connected to asbestos. Now, whether the asbestos is the sole cause, it's possible, but it's certainly the sort of tipping factor. So again, it's still simplistic to think of a cause, because they just it's multiple and different combinations, different sets of symptoms, different sets of circumstances, and and again, the family in the same environment, maybe living in the same terrain, and yet they could have different mindset. Because I know my mindset was different from my family. That's definitely. that was another part of my learning journey, being very different from them, feeling very different, and so I know. Because I really went to see medical people when I was young. I was quite proud of myself. I'm never ill, and until okay, well, here's something for you to deal with that was thrown on me.
Yeah, there's just such a variety of things. That's the whole problem with reductionism in general, is trying to boil everything down to like almost programming code of if this, then that, when there could be a variety of reasons, like you mentioned, being really into reading fiction at a point in life. And that's actually, my education background is I was a creative writing major, and no idea how I was going to use that. Didn't really want to be a writer per se, but it turned out to be one of the greatest things for my path, because in tuning, for example, just being able to think in symbols and interpret things on a analytical symbolic level, symptoms as symbols, is really like totally crucial. And I wanted to start to talk about just in general the flawed nature of theories about disease from your perspective, and give an example. The most recent tuning I did, really, really great client. I enjoyed meeting her so much, and she was kind of having it's sort of an emergency situation where out of nowhere a few months ago started having these digestive issues that when things would get blocked, it would lead to the heart to start racing, palpitating, tachycardia, like really uncomfortable. And this, felt like quite an emergency. I thought going into it, okay, I'm probably going to need to go look into heart chakra stuff and maybe sacral chakra, stomach level stuff. When I get into the session, I've let the energy guide me to the most important spot, and it's not always where I think it's going to be. And it winds up being in the crown chakra. And I start combing through the crown chakra, and I hit the zone called the ancestral river. which I don't normally even like go out of my way to look for. I pride myself on not trying to see things just to see them. I let it tell me what it is. And I hit the ancestral river and I was like, oh, there's the father's mother was raising kids in a state of poverty and fear and danger. And I asked about that. I was like, were these conditions present for your father's mother? And the father's mother had been in London during World War II, raising small children while the husband was away and at war with the threat of being bombed and like not a lot of support or no one to ask for help. And like all those conditions were absolutely there. And so that is far beyond what anything is going to be talked about to you by like a doctor if you have an issue with your heart racing. But just on the simple symbolic level, there's like an overage of fear from past ancestrally forward that's just not quite been dealt with. And, there's other circumstances to recognize in attuning besides just that. But right out the gate, we find that. And the vibe tells me that that's what it is. And I get the confirmation that there was an ancestor, that exact person, mother's father, in exactly conditions as I described. So like, what's going on, materialism? Like, how are we even able to get that information while we're half a world apart from each other? Me in Missouri and this person in New Zealand. So it's just, we need a very different framework of thinking about our stuff. And sometimes we need somebody to help us analyze things that are a little too close to us, that it's hard for us to see in our own story because it's so familiar. But let's talk about that. What are the flaws in the ideas of disease? What are the more correct ways to understand things and get away from problematic labels, and all of that? Like, let's just open it up.
That is a fantastic example of how ridiculous the reductionist method is, because somebody with those symptoms would have either been sent to a cardio specialist or a specialist for digestive issues. I can't think what that would. Yeah, can't think at the moment. But yeah, so they would have been sent to a specialist that just deals with that area, and they would have been looking for something in that area that is wrong. A functional problem, and so completely the wrong starting point. And again, because they're looking for something that's wrong, they'd be looking to sort of various tests. So again, the tests would be, I don't know necessarily what, but they'd certainly do an ECG and those sorts of things, or blood pressure and that kind of thing. So when they do those tests, they have a set of results that they call the normal range, and that's arbitrary. There is nobody in the world who is normal. I mean, they've never actually tested, because they don't actually know what a healthy person is.
It's like when they assign someone psychiatric meds and they say you have a chemical imbalance, but then you pull on that thread and you find out there's no such thing as an established chemical balance. When they say chemical imbalance, like, what chemicals are you talking about? Oh, it's just a thing we say. It's like ridiculous. It's just jargon.
And that's exactly it. It is a thing they say, and it is what they are taught. It's what they believe in. And so they stick to it. It's because they spent years studying it and they become a specialist in that area. And that's like even further down the line, so many more years. So it is the idea that there's something wrong, when in some cases it's just a different expression of how we are. So, I mean, just something like blood pressure. It's well known that people who go for their blood pressure to be tested is always high first, because they're nervous, they're anxious about having high blood pressure. So the whole thing is problematic. And again, the tests for certain things are extremely dubious, especially if it's anything to do with these little invisible enemies that are supposed to be floating around. I mean, that the whole thing is wrong from the start, and the tests are completely meaningless. So they don't tell you anything. And it's not even, it's not just restricted to the germs, because even when it comes to genetics, there's another huge rabbit hole there to dive down, because our genes do not control our biology. And that goes back to the work of Dr. Bruce Lipton, which found his book fairly early in 2007 or 8 or something like that. So that was part of the kind of connection between the consciousness and the health thing. It's fascinating once you start looking just how much information there is. And there's still so much more to learn, because they are working on the idea that there's, again, there are diseases, and that, like you alluded to, that there's diseases mean there's something wrong, that the body isn't functioning. And yes, there are times when it's sort of out of homeostasis. The body does its best to bring itself into homeostasis, and at the same time, we don't live in that narrow band of homeostasis all the time. There's always a kind of a weave around, and as long as you don't go sort of too far either side of it, the body will bring itself back in. So it looks after itself. And again, it's not just the body, it's the mind, it's consciousness as well, because it's, we exist beyond the body, as you know from your work. And so there's so much more still to learn. And I think, it's we're moving in the right direction of learning, and it's just fascinating once you start looking into it. And the key point is, of course, that it means that we can take control, responsibility for ourselves as well. And it is a complete mind shift. And I think that's the hardest part for people, when they've just believed everything they've been told, and then they're having to learn something different. So they have a conception of what these symptoms are. And the first thing, there's something wrong, so it's that something is a symptom, because you have a symptom, that there is a problem. And that again is the mind shift. It's not a problem. It's a symptom, and you can deal with it and let your body just process it. And obviously stopping the symptom is the wrong thing to do. And that's what the whole system is based on. You're just like, you've got symptoms, you must stop them. And again, going back to the C word, there's an idea that the more you do to stop the kind of what are called acute symptoms, the usual things that are given these minor names like colds or flu or whatever, the more you do to suppress those with, the usual things called medicines, then you are stopping those processes. You're preventing the body from doing what it does. And so because it can't actually do its normal thing with getting those things out and it's through the normal channels, it will try and find a different way. And that's where you get different kinds of symptoms. And the more these things are suppressed, and the more things that are taken in that are not useful for the body, even though you're told they are, the body can get a bit clogged up. And so that's where you get the more chronic conditions. And they get a whole range of labels as well. So so the more chronic conditions, just the more of a build-up. It could be physical toxins. It could also be emotional, psychospiritual, ancestral, could be all sorts of things. So, and that's the other thing with the C, you get the idea of, it's hereditary, or well, if it runs in the family, you need to be screened. So, of course, people then get scared, got to go out and be screened. And some of the screening things are potential contributory factors to something that happens further down the line. So, and the fear thing is an important factor, because again, our beliefs, that's proven through the placebo and nocebo effect. The body, you can actually manifest something. even though there's no reason for it. So this is again where it can actually be not just something sort of physical. It can be literally that you're trapped into this belief that it runs in the family.
You gotta think of the word magic too when they say you gotta get screened, because the original meaning of the word screen is to separate the worthless from the valuable. So it's like they bring you in and they're like, are you a potential source of money for us to extract, or are you really worthless to us? We're screening you. We're sifting through people. That's kind of how I read that word. Have you heard Eileen talk about the astrological charts being in people's biofield? I'll just see it's yes or no. Like, I don't know a lot about that, but I have a theory I wanted to float out there, because she said that she started to do experiments with another person to find like the person's astrology indicators in their field in different places, like within these 12 bands.
Yes. I've heard a bit about that, because I was at Confluence when she did the tuning of the United States.
Oh, cool. She tuned the United States. We needed that.
On the, yes, for the astrological chart. Yeah, that was pretty phenomenal. And it was on the, it was tuning to the 1776, the date of independence, which I thought was quite interesting, that I was there being from the old country, being a Brit. I was like, like, you can be free. I don't, so that was interesting. But so I am aware that Eileen started to look into that. So again, astrology, I'm again, like human design, also have had my astrology charts prepared, and a recent reading I actually had with Topher did my celestic profile, and it was wow. Okay, kind of yes. There's definitely something in all of that, and again, it might sound probably not to your audience, sound weird, but it's it's crazy, but it's really does, as I say, really resonated with, and a lot of what he said, it was like, I can see how that fits, and the different things that he was suggesting is like, it was like, I can see how that fits with what I've gone through, what I'm going through, what I'm doing, and that. So there's definitely. So it makes sense that Eileen's looking into tuning this. I mean, it makes sense. I'd forgotten about your thing with words, and yes, obviously. So screening, I'd not heard that about screening, but I'm also, it's like the importance of words as well, and how we can use words to, the word magic, and how we can bring ourselves out of that and change our language so that we can, shift into something that is more beneficial for us.
Yeah, and if you go back to the Latin word cerno, where screen comes from, that's a word about like judgment and fighting and skirmishing. But I brought up the astrology and the biofield because, we hear you alluded to the whole hereditary thing that they apply to various diseases and risk factors on the subject of screening and all that. And with the idea that I haven't really looked for astrology in the biofield, but if that is a thing, it got me just thinking along the lines of, well, would there be like internal transits that happen? And maybe beyond just the idea of planets and zodiac signs, would there be potential for transits of conjunction of parts of your biofield? And why I say this is because I'm thinking about the client that I brought up from the other day, where this heart palpitation, digestive stuff came out of the blue, seemingly. Like, why would that manifest when it did and not sometime sooner? If there was this ancestor trauma there the whole time, like what triggered it? And this just anecdotal, just a theory. But what's really, really fascinating about it is the ancestral river where that flows for people. Maternal side on the left, paternal side on the right, about 10 inches off the body on both sides. And this was the person in New Zealand, right? And the ancestor trauma had to do with wartime. Well, New Zealand was more or less in wartime during cooties. They got it worse than just about anywhere. And the issue triggered for this client when the stuck energy, trauma energy of cooties experience transited over the ancestral river. So as you age, you're like, if you have stuck energy, it gets further and further away from the body, and how far away it is tells you how old you were when it happened. So it's been 3 or so years, 4 years since COVID, right? So that COVID time period transited over the ancestral river at the same, and that's the time when that crossed that point, when those things converged, is when the illness manifested. So like now I've got this whole new theory to examine about what might trigger ancestor hereditary stuff. Like, why would it come up and when would it come up? And it's just completely theoretical, but this is just along the lines of like, we need a whole new framework for considering, because it's not like we should rule out the possibility that things that our ancestors expressed, we could express. That's reasonable, but like, how does it function? How to look out for it? How to address it? We got to open up all those questions, you know?
Absolutely. Is she a recent client for you?
Yeah, it was just the other day. So I'm still thinking about that one. It's the most recent one on my mind.
So what I meant was, is that the first time you'd actually done a tuning with her?
Yeah, it was our first for that person.
Right. So maybe it presented itself just in time for you to have that experience with her, for you to learn, for you to expand your understanding. So the timing is not just, I mean, that absolutely makes sense. With your idea, I mean, that would certainly be something to look into, because as you say, when the memories sort of move out, and that's when it met that river, and at the same time you were there at that time for her to be able to then have that experience, and for you to then have the opportunity to consider that, to look into that, to see what merit there is, and just it's something new to look into, which is, I mean, just fascinating. This is the sort of thing, I mean, there's just so much still to learn, and we don't know, because we're just given this, as you say, reductionist idea of who and what we are and what this is. And you go, no, there's so much more. There's so much more.
And that's why I bring it up too. It's just so other tuners out there might start looking for ancestral river transits, and let me know what you find out. We want more data on that subject. So while we're still in the first hour here, we should talk more about, actually, you know what? I'll kick it to you. What do you think that the first hour should contain, for going forward to other subjects?
Well, I suppose the underlying message is that certainly with a lot of the work I do with the writing, because I've been writing on Substack now for a couple of years, the main point for me is to help people come away from fear when it is totally unnecessary. Now, because I'm not saying, oh, you mustn't be fearful. At the same time, when we're made fearful of things that are totally inappropriate, then we're held in a space of fear that we just don't need to be. And that is detrimental on all levels, because, being in the state of fear, people don't think. I mean, that's pretty clear. So it's really to show people that we have been misled, and we don't have to live in fear of these invisible enemies, and we don't have to live in fear of all sorts of things that we're told about the way our body works, and at the same time to take responsibility, and also to know that who and what we are is more than this, physical, our sort of physical being. which moves into what some people think of, just say, oh, well, being spiritual. Well, yes, at the same time, being the life we have here, this actual physical being is part of being spiritual as well. So it's not a spiritual experience. It's not separate from this. And it's getting our minds around the idea that we are more than this. At the same time, this isn't a lower, our physical body it's not a lower form of existence. It's we're just, it's just some kind of, accident or something that, we want to get away from it or escape from it or something like that. There's so much more to us, and it's what we can do here. And it's recognizing that our ideas and our thoughts and our belief, and again, through the language that we use, because we've been tricked into using certain words and thinking in certain ways that limit us. These different ways are intended to limit and control us. And so the freedom comes from recognizing that, we can change our language, or we don't have to give the same meaning to the words once you understand that they don't have that meaning, or they don't have to have that meaning, or we just kind of start changing our words, start changing our language so that we don't hold ourselves into this kind of victim thing. Because that's the other thing with these labels, these conditions, that some people attach to them and create an identity out of whatever it is. And there are different reasons why people may do that. It's just to get out of this mindset of being stuck in this paradigm, this old reductionist paradigm, and realizing that there's so much more to us, that there's so much more we are and can be and can do. And that's where, that kind of idea you've just had of all sorts of amazing different things that we could still be learning about how astrology is real, is connected to who we are. We are influenced by everything. We're connected to everything. We are all absolutely interconnected, and we are individual and interconnected at the same time. And it's sort of expressing that individuality in collaboration with others to get the most out of what we can do, which is why the last 4.5 years has been about separation and dividing. And that's another thing that they're continuing to make us feel divided. And so the solution is to come out of those ideas of being divided and say, well, okay, we may have different ideas. Let's sit down and talk about those ideas and see if we can each learn from each other. Doesn't mean either of us has to convince the other one. It's just to have conversations, to collaborate, to communicate, and not to be pulled into all this, as I say, this unnecessary fear-mongering of things that just are not, do not affect your health in the way that we've been told. There's so much in it, but the simplest thing is just the whole basis of that model is wrong. So, okay, well, let's just move that to one side rather than pick at all the different pieces. You spend a lifetime doing that. So just, the model is wrong. Let's look at what we do know and see what we can build from there.
Yeah, it's exciting to be on the frontier of figuring things out again. And it's like so silly with any kind of perspective of history to think that the people that tell you they've got it all figured out actually do. Because anyone that knows what came before knows that everything that was the surefire, we definitely know this is the truth thing, always gets replaced eventually. So isn't it more powerful to operate from the place of not knowing and the apophatic truth search by ruling out what it isn't, without getting stuck on some kind of certainty that is just going to later leave you in ruins? I love that you also brought up how it's all about finding all the sneaky ways in which we might identify as victims to something and getting out of that. Particularly important when we're talking about the big machine and all of the nefarious things going on out there, because we actually always have the power to rise above and beyond whatever effects that big machine might be offering us. And to remember that a victim, the definition of that word is offered as a sacrifice, basically. A victim is a living being sacrificed to a deity. That's the definition of the word. And at the modern age, the deity is the state. The state is people's God. And so if you don't want to be a sacrifice to the state, then just find the ways in which you can retain some independence from those systems and otherwise make peace with the things that you are dependent on and move from there towards further and further independence. But there's always a way. That's the nature of nature, is that every organism, whatever environment it is in, what that organism needs to thrive is in the same environment as the organism itself. And it's just all these belief structures that put the walls between us and perceiving where the opportunity and the abundance is at. But it's right outside your front door. You got what they call allergies. The dandelion's growing right there. And there's a million other examples. It's all right here for us. There is no actual lack. There's just a lack of knowledge. My people suffer for lack of knowledge. And looking forward to going through your Substack. I didn't know you had that. Do you want to let people know what they can find on there, or if there's any other stuff you want to make them aware of, or how they can connect with you? Let them know where you're going to be in about a week or two as well, as we're wrapping up hour one.
Yeah, my Substack is dawnlister.substack.com. I've called it Dawn's Writings. I've been writing for the last, for 2 years now, mainly about the health side of things, generally from the perspective of pulling apart the nonsense to then help eliminate the fear, that kind of thing. And so that's, as I say, Substack. That's really the main. I am on Facebook. Recently joined Instagram. And next week, yes, next week I'll be at Music and Sky, musicandsky.com. I am one of the speakers this year, so that's really exciting. I'm looking forward to that. Joining with the community, the great bunch of people, and there's a whole load of different events and speakers and workshops and all kinds of fun events, music, and it's a great opportunity to be with like-minded and like-hearted people, who are looking at creating solutions, looking at how we. I always am sort of so tempted to, it's just because of Alex's organisation, the way forward. It's just, about finding the way forward. It's just, it's almost impossible not to just talk about that. So, it is about learning the way forward. And as you said, one of the ways is not to say what we know, is actually to just let go of what isn't true and just say, okay, well, there are some things we've got some ideas about, and happy to keep moving when we find something different, and keep opening up and keep letting go of the things that just simply aren't true.
Brilliant. And guess we'll jump over to the second part now. And I've really enjoyed getting to know you a little better here in part one. I think this is the future of more potential collaborations. You're a really swell lady, and I've enjoyed the first hour greatly. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
All right, my friends, I appreciate you guys tuning in. I hope you enjoyed the conversation with Dawn as much as I did. But before we continue into the outro, I have a few questions for you. Did you hear the joke about germs? Actually, never mind. I don't want to spread it around. Okay, I got another one for you. 2 bacteria walk into a restaurant. The hostess looks at them and says, "Sorry, we don't serve bacteria." The 2 bacteria reply, "But hey, we're the staff." Ha, ha, PH staff. Okay, I got another one. What is bacteria? It's the rear entrance to cafeterias. What do you call a germ that loves to tell jokes? It's a pandemic. All right, I'm legitimately stopping now. I figured since germs are a big joke in the first place, and the last episode we came out of the closet about being parents soon. I don't know if closet is the right word, but we let you guys into our world a little bit. So if you watched a previous show, you know that I'm going to be a dad, so it's only appropriate that I tell some dad jokes. I might make it a thing. Please don't unsubscribe. So yeah, this was a great conversation with Dawn. I know we didn't go super deep and thorough into her book, What Really Makes You Ill, and it is a fantastic book because I think she's had enough interviews like that, and I felt more of a camaraderie and friendship towards Dawn that it would make sense for us to just sort of get to know each other better and let the conversation flow where it would. And I liked that a lot, especially felt like the right move because pretty recently we talked to Mark Gober, and his episode, at least in the second hour, we definitely tackled the germ theory question in detail. So it's not like we're missing that information on the podcast, but it's, it just was more fun this way. So I hope you guys enjoyed that. Definitely check out the Mark Gober show if you haven't, from, I don't know, a month or two ago, something like that. Really good time. Now, before we go further into the outro, I wanted to tell you guys about Plus extension, second hour that you can get by joining my Patreon or Rockfin or becoming a member to the YouTube channel. Member, subscriber, different thing, but there's a paid membership option with the YouTube channel. And if you are on there, I've started uploading as I can some of the classic episodes from 2022, 23 onto the YouTube side of the membership so that you can get some of that great older content in full and not be missing out just because that's the way that you're a supporter. I appreciate all of the supporters. Definitely think Patreon's the way to go in terms of the best option. Works easiest, probably. But on Rockfin, you can be there with us when we premiere or live stream something that is for premium only. So there's advantages to it all. But Patreon's got a cool system where you can copy a link for an RSS feed to the extended version of the show and put that right into your favorite podcast player. And then you're listening to the 2-hour interviews just like you would any other free podcast. And it's very simple. And at $5 a month, it seems like something you might as well just set it and forget it. I mean, not forget to listen, but just doing it the way you would anything else. Yeah, it's a great way to go. Now, I was perusing through some of Dawn's writings on her Substack, which is a great thing to read, subscribe to. If you're a Substack user, go check out Dawn Lester over there at Dawn Lester. And there was an article from back in 2022 about the germ theory fallacy. I wanted to go through some of the stuff that was in that article that I found, worthwhile to bring up since I'm on the subject. First of all, she goes into talking about the beginnings of germ theory. And I'm going to read from the article here where she says, there are a number of sources that provide a corroboration of the assertion that the germ theory lacks any original scientific proof. One of these sources is Dr. M.L. Leverson, MD, who in May 1911, way back in 1911, gave a lecture in London in which he discussed his investigations that had led him to the conclusion that, quote, the entire fabric of the germ theory of disease rests upon assumptions which not only have not been proved, but which are incapable of proof, and many of them can be proved to be the reverse of truth. The basic one of these unproven assumptions, wholly due to Pasteur, is the hypothesis that all the so-called infectious and contagious disorders are caused by germs. End quote. Continuing, Dr. M. Beddoe Bailey also exposed the lack of any scientific basis for the germ theory in his 1928 article published in the journal London Medical World. He states that, quote, I am prepared to maintain with scientifically established facts that in no single instance has it been conclusively proved that any microorganism is the specific cause of a disease. So that guy, Dr. Bailey, back in the 20s, he seemed like a totally based individual, theosophist, spiritual dude, against cowpokes back in the day when it really mattered, before things had snowballed to the level they're at now. And I think it's interesting to consider that as the allopathic medical establishment was kind of getting up and running and spreading its tentacles across the Western world, that things occurred in the world that took everyone's attention off of these more domestic changes that were underway, in particular in the health realm. And obviously, I just can't ignore, and I always come back to this and think about how while this shift was happening, the world gets embroiled in a world war against who? The Germans, twice. And then after we're done fighting the Germans, we get ourselves, we're already lock, stock, and barrel, totally under the thumb of Rockefeller medicine. And it's just over. It's a done deal. All the men were away fighting the war, and they come back, and it's, the last thing that society really wanted to worry about was that. I think everyone just wanted to get on with living and have the easy button. And that's something medicine promised. Now, what's interesting to me is being vilified as they were, right? The germs are the bad guys, the Germans. The Germans have had a lot of the most outspoken criticisms in decades following the world wars of the more widely accepted mainstream medical models. I mean, you have German New Medicine, for an example. In Dawn's article about the fallacy of germ theory, she quotes a German doctor, Stephen Lanka, who in the course of his studies says that he and others have not been able to find the proof of the existence of disease-causing viruses anywhere. And I looked into this guy, and apparently he had posted and boasted about how nobody was going to be able to prove the existence of a virus as the cause of disease. And he had a reward out on his website, 100,000 euros. Of course, for anyone that can, find, it's a bounty for anyone that can find proof of the existence of a disease-causing virus. And you go to Google this guy, and of course you just get all of the fact checkers and the slanderers, like the BBC.com post that talks about how, I guess, a German court ordered that he had to pay somebody the 100,000 euros because they allegedly came up with scientific studies that proved the claim that viruses cause disease. I have never seen such documentation or experiments that prove that. Go to Mark Gober's book, and he combed the entire known universe for a single study that proved that a virus existed as an isolated cause that is the agent that resulted in somebody's disease or illness. It's never been done. That is a fact. So this guy, Stephen Lanka, he's totally vilified, of course. I don't know if he ever had to pay that 100,000. The front page search results make it look like he did, but I would reckon that someone that intelligent probably just pushed back, and they don't put that on the headline that it didn't actually, go through. But who knows? I don't know. Another quote from Dawn's article, she says, "It is claimed that germs multiply within the cells of the host, and that this can precipitate an excess level of cell death that is said to be an indicator of disease. It's commonly assumed that it is the germ that caused the cell to die, but this is a mistaken assumption. There are genuine reasons that cells die after they have been subjected to the preparation procedures used in laboratory experiments, as explained by Torsten Engelbrecht and Dr. Klaus Kohnleim in their book entitled Virus Mania." Some more Germans here. They say this phenomenon is particularly virulent in bacterial and viral research and in the whole pharmaceutical development of medicines altogether, where laboratory experiments on tissue samples, which are tormented with a variety of often highly reactive chemicals, allow few conclusions about reality, and yet conclusions are constantly drawn and then passed straight on to the production of medicines and vaccines. So, if you follow there, they were talking about how the studies that allegedly prove that viruses cause an illness, they are these crazy chemical cocktails. You got monkey fetus cells and scraped pus off of a cow boil and, other chemical constituents. And all that is in the mix, and then that's injected to a body or exposed to cells in a petri dish, and then the cells start to die. You think maybe there could be another factor at play with all of those various poisons mixed up together. But that's basically virology. It's totally mad science. So I bring all this to the forefront to just have us all continue to improve our thinking and our rhetoric around these subjects, especially anything that's an invisible boogeyman. Yeah, I was having this conversation with my mom, I don't know, earlier in the week, and she was referring to the big global warming situation. And she's not hip, or she's hip to the fact that it's like a scam, right? That the climate is changing, and it always changes because change is the constant of nature. And all of the things that they're claimed to for us to be like bad, naughty, bad people, we're causing it, we're killing the planet, that all that stuff is obviously just rhetoric used to push different agendas that smell like communism and socialism, right? And further restrictions and lockdowns could be someday on the horizon from that angle, now that it's been tested from the viral angle. And now that you see, how these things, I'm hoping you see, let me just break it down a little better. Do you see the similarity between this alleged human-caused climate change and germ theory? Because both of these ideas are used for further measures of austerity to restrict the freedoms of, and to tax and siphon wealth out of the economy and out of the society. And they're both predicated on the idea that there's an invisible thing that is happening. It's dangerous and deadly. It could end the world, and it's your fault that it exists. You're doing it, even though you're not doing it on purpose, and you can't tell that you're doing it, and it doesn't seem like you're doing it, but you're the dirty bad one. The invisible boogeyman is changing the climate. The invisible boogeyman is spreading the germ. Do you see the similarity here? It's the same thing. Totally the same thing. So ultimately, whether it's faith in the medical system or faith in our own body's intelligence and able to maintain homeostasis and the intelligent design of nature, you have a choice at the bottom of whatever worldview you choose. I mean, everything is free will. You can't take free will away. And so, you're either going to be blindly jumping across the chasm of faith and belief in the authority to take on the mainstream views, or you're going to have a different type of belief that, essentially tells you that you are happening to life. That's maybe what you could consider the terrain theory model, because you have control of your terrain, or you have an impact over your terrain internally, and it morphs based on your thoughts and based on your actions. Basically, the germ idea is that life is happening to you. You're a victim to life. The boogeyman can get you at any minute. And to do away with that is to realize that your thoughts influence your reality. Your beliefs influence your reality. Your behavior influences your reality. Your free will. So you're happening to life, not the other way around. I hope everybody gets that. I hope everyone enjoyed this conversation. I'm realizing now, with all my dad jokes and all that, and all my virology talk, I forgot to discuss what's actually in the Plus extension. So if you aren't a member yet, Patreon and Rockford are the ways to go, or the YouTube membership. All of that's linked in the show notes, and you can tune into the second hour. We talk about Don's more recent article, The Demonization of the Sun. We discuss transcending resistance to polarized emotion, why labels are more like curses when it comes to health, labels and diagnoses antithetical to the idea of health. We discussed attending to the message in pain, the purpose of pain, the communication that it is from our body. And we talked about weather warfare. Is weather warfare leading the world towards climate lockdowns? And reality. Got into the big question. Is reality an illusion, or is something else going on? And this was maybe the most interesting part to me. We kind of had this epiphany about the old medical idea of humours and humans and the moisture within us and the waters above us and below us, and how all of that matters to our interaction with life and our health. And then we finished off with some fun talk about what to make of the secret spells and the word magic of English that sometimes we unconsciously are saying and don't realize it. And what's that about? And what do we do about it, if anything? So that was a great talk. I loved Dawn. Hope to talk to her again someday. I think she's wrapping up with the crew at Music and Sky, DJ Mike Winter, and the Alpha Vedic people. I have been must be nicing them all weekend. Must be nice. Now I'm going to get out of here. It's been kind of a long outro. I drug my feet about it. Like, what am I going to say? I don't know what to say. And this one, it was just a good talk. And then here I am 16 minutes later. I guess I had something to say. The dad jokes really sparked the whole flow. I'm grateful for the internet to provide easy access to terrible puns. Pandemic is upon us. All right. Well, with that, I'm out of here. You guys have a great day, great evening, whether it's in the future or the present. I hope you enjoy the content, timeless wisdom, and I'll catch you guys on the next one. Much love.